My name is Grant Mincy. I am a senior fellow at the Center for a Statewide Society. I hold the Elinor Ostrom Chair of Environmental Studies and Commons Governance. That one's a mouthful. I'm also a biology professor at a local community college in Knoxville, Tennessee. Anarchism means a lot of things to different people. So when I consider myself an anarchist, I do kind of take the more Chomskyan viewpoint on that, which is systems of power and domination exist, but just because they exist, it doesn't mean that they are legitimate. So it's the role of a people who wish to be free to challenge that legitimacy. And then, of course, there's tools and strategies to dismantle illegitimate power, obviously, and there's different ways to do that. But when I consider myself an anarchist, it's just that, not accepting systems of power and domination just because they're simply there.
Right.
So environmentalism to me is pretty important, just from a personal standpoint. I kind of grew up in the natural world. My favorite vacations as a child, I grew up in Michigan. My favorite vacations as a child was actually going to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and I loved it. I mean, I loved the tunnels of rhododendron, and I loved the damp earth, and I mean, I loved everything about it. So I think just from my parents getting me out, it was something that I really liked. Professionally, it's really important because as I did my undergraduate and then graduate studies in environmental science, I really started learning the importance of considering yourself a biological organism inside of an environment. And I think a lot of people don't think that way, that somehow humans are separate from the natural world when we're really not. From having to eat, largely a plant-based diet to air pollution being one of the leading killers in the world. We are biological organisms and we are impacted by our environment. So if I want to maximize human liberty and freedom, and then I think that it's important to get the message out that we actually are part of an ecosystem, that we are biological organisms, and that idea that life isn't disposable. If you're going to trash the planet, you have to trash people. And that's an idea that I think a free society would want to reject. So in a stateless society, preserving the environment, and the question always does come down to, so the federal government does a lot to protect the environment, so what are we going to do with these greedy corporations, right? And fair enough, the state does a lot to protect the environment. But the state also has some problems as well when it comes to protecting the environment. So if we take the Endangered Species Act, the United States' most powerful environmental law. Well, since it was passed, it's been brought in front of courts. Holes have been punched through it, and from a conservationist perspective, all these years later, it's really not all that effective. It takes a long time to move through the court process, and in the meantime, these species are still going extinct. I would also note that the state does supply, especially fossil fuel corporations, with exuberant amounts of money, so that those corporations themselves don't have to do internal risk pooling. It doesn't matter how much money they spend on extracting a resource, because it's subsidized by taxpayers, and then afterwards the true environmental cost is left to these local people to have to deal with it. Yeah, the EPA does a lot to help regulate our air quality and things like that, but the government itself also pollutes quite a bit as well. And I'd also point out the importance of the industrial military complex there. Whatever gains the state's making in environmental health, its quest for resources and the footprint of the military is the largest in the world. So how do we keep people from running away and polluting without some centralized structure? I would also note that centralized structures, they build these top-down solutions, sweeping policy for very complex problems. Climate change, for instance. It's a very complex issue. It's global in scale. So we have these big top-down ideas about how to deal with it. But it's important to remember that environmental issues, all environmental issues, and climate change included, there are local and there are regional consequences to that as well. And so when you start developing ideas at the local level to the regional level and then on up the chain of command, you get complex policies for complex issues. and you also have a diversity in those policies. So operating under the rules like natural selection would, you can actually select for the best types of policies to carry you through a certain period. So I would actually advocate in a stateless society where we're looking at things locally and regionally, we actually get a big diversity in policy that can help with these complex issues, more so than what a centralized authority would be able to do. Better outcomes. So with greens and technology, when we interact there, I do think it's fundamentally important to question technology. And this isn't an anti-technology position. I love technology, so I use technology all the time. I think technology is a great way to enhance human communication systems that actually allow us to share ideas. But technology is also dangerous, and I would say that when we examine what's fueling our technology with fossil fuels, there's something to look at and there's something to examine there. When we look at emerging technologies, we also get really important social justice ideas. Biomimicry, right? That's a new emerging technology. Respecting the wisdom of organisms. So when we look at our tech, right, we have our smartphones and those are great, but what's behind that? We got vacuums and furnaces and fossil fuel emissions, but we get this nice hard piece of plastic with some metal inside of it that does wonderful things for society. Twitter's great, right? But then there's biomimicry. The clam uses its natural environment to create hard parts, right? Our own skeleton creates pound per pound stuff that's harder than steel within our own bodies. So questioning technology and the types of technology that are used isn't necessarily an anti-technology position. It's a great position to take in the early part of the 21st century, because if we're going to ask how we move forward, questioning these old forms of technology and trying to push forward these newer, sustainable, and healthier ideas, I think that melds with environmentalism great. So wild anarchism and reconciliation ecology. If you Google wild anarchism, you get something called rewilding comes up, which is pretty much the anarcho-primitivist position, which is not a position that I hold. But also, if you Google green anarchism, that trends towards the primitive lifestyle as well, and that's perplexing to me, because that's not me at all. So when I think of what wild anarchism actually means, it's the true beauty of natural ecosystems and the liberating qualities that they have. So when you go out into the wild, you can have fun, you can get in dangerous situations. Sometimes it's eerie out there. Often it's beautiful. It's awe-inspiring. It gets us the hell away from everything that's going on in our lives. We're not around political systems. We're not around economic systems. We get to enjoy some leisure time, which is all that much more important these days when we're connected to work all the time. So it's this appreciation for the wild, and it's the appreciation of the self in the wild. And an extension of that is when we do come back home, what did we learn while we were out there? And how do we start inviting some of those principles back into our lives at home? How do we enhance our leisure time? How do we enjoy the landscape around us when we're in an urban environment? So that's what wild anarchism means to me. And part of that's reconciliation ecology. So there's three paradigms to ecological sustainability. Preservation and conservation is one. Preservation being, let's not intrude on the wild. Conservation being, let's use the wild sustainably for provisioning resources like wood and cotton, whatever it would be. Restoration is going into these landscapes that have been disturbed and trying to reorganize them and kickstart ecological succession. And then reconciliation is actually inviting, instead of this idea that we need to constantly spread into the hinterlands, reconciliation ecology is, I am a biological organism. How do we invite those hinterlands back into the city? And so things like urban farms, big restoration projects in creeks around town trying to increase water quality, something as simple as a neighborhood cleanup, something as revolutionary as the tomato plant in your front yard. All of that increases habitat space, it cleans up the natural environment, it makes overall public and environmental health better, and it's a way to reconcile human-dominated landscape with the environment. Why are libertarians and anarchists not well versed in ecological problems? That's a really interesting question. I almost think that they are. I think that it's a hard thing to talk about because for so long the environmental movement, throughout the 60s, it was policy based. It was the Clean Air Act, it was the Clean Water Act, it was the EPA. It was these big sweeping policies, and and even today we still think of these big policies that are out there to protect the environment, and they're a state issue. I think if we actually were to pry a little bit into libertarians and into anarchists a little bit, though, when you get to the 80s, that ideology kind of switched into this idea of sustainability, which is using resources sustainably so that we can enhance our quality of life, but also not rob this quality of life from future generations. And the quality of life argument, is something that I think all anarchists and libertarians could get behind. And when you start noting what sustainability is, that's actually a market-based approach to ecological issues, especially with this idea of ecosystem services, which are things that the human population gets from the natural world for free simply because it's there. So things like provisioning resources or cultural resources, supporting services, the things that actually keep us alive, like oxygen in the air and things like that. Regulating services like better air quality, better water quality, carbon storage, and things like that. So I think it's exploring environmentalism in a different way. So once you bring up these market approaches and market dynamics and actually get into what sustainability actually is, you can critique state power, you can critique human dominance, which is something that libertarians and anarchists alike can get along with. Plus you get to introduce a bit of environmentalism in there too. Elinor Ostrom, her research is it's incredible, and the stuff that stemmed from her research is incredible. So as far as how it shaped my politics, I've had this really weird voyage to get here. I was initially brought in to, or learned of anarchism from Howard Zinn when I read A People's History of the United States, and so I was like, well, that sounds pretty cool, what's that all about? And of course, if you read Zinn, you're not too far away from discovering Noam Chomsky. And then he's perplexing, because, on some issues he's a very progressive liberal, but his overall goal is, a stateless society, so that's interesting to wrap your head around. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in 2008 came Ron Paul, who I liked, and I didn't think I should like him, but that got me scratching my head, like, what's going on here? And that's when I discovered Murray Rothbard and some others. And that got me on Google. And so I got on Google, and I was like, how do I put these idea of markets and these big ideas of these progressive champions together? And I found C4SS. And so when I got there, it was actually James Tuttle, who sent me some documents on Elinor Ostrom, and she's a great synthesis of both. She believes in markets and market diversity, in that not in a market as a pure economic system, but a bunch of institutions that are crafted from the bottom up that compete with each other, and the best policy wins. So that's fundamental to her research, and she does a lot with environmental issues. This idea of the tragedy of the commons, you see in her research that it kind of gets turned on its head. That excessive regulation, people tend to ignore excessive regulation, for better or worse. It's what they do. But when people are able to craft their own policies, they're proud of it, and they follow it, and it's because they're in charge of it. And so from Elinor Ostrom, I was able to discover adaptive collaborative management and adaptive governments, and I was actually taking a graduate course in that at the time, and her name popped up in that graduate course quite a bit, and it's been a very successful method of resource conflict resolution, and I think there's a lot to learn from her. Okay, so as far as tactics go, I would, as to make an anarchist society, stateless society that's also green. The anarchist society, I do my activism for a stateless society and to enhance my ideas of human liberty behind a keyboard. That's what I'm comfortable with, and I will absolutely go to town hall meetings, and I'll get my voice in there. Just in the past spring, the Bureau of Land Management was having some hearings on what to do with coal ash and further strip mining permits, and I let them know that I'm not a fan of any of those. And so I'm very comfortable in writing. I'm very comfortable in speaking, and I'm very comfortable in engaging the political establishment, and that's me. That's what I want to do. It's on an individual basis. There are other tactics out there, more direct actions, civil disobedience, and things like that I think are fantastic. So all I would argue is it's on an individual basis what tactics you want to use, because there are different consequences for different tactics. So know what you're getting into, and don't do anything outside of your comfort zone. Would be my advice on tactics. Individuals can make their own decisions to decide what they want to do. Personally, as I said, I'm more on the academic mindset and engaging in policy. As far as how to keep it green, I would recommend, if those are issues that people are interested in, I would learn about the natural sciences, and I would either do it through a pure natural sciences, just reading up on geology or biology or anything like that, or I would actually take a look at sociology. What we find is the disciplines intersect, so I would just be well versed. Because we can make some really bad decisions that we think are green, like the carbon tax, that actually have some really bad outcomes. So I would know your material and be comfortable with the tactics that you're going to take. And I think that way any kind of activism will make a society more free. Okay, so what problems do anarchists have and what do they need to really engage in and do? And it's an image. When we say anarchism or anarchist, and I don't think it's a fault of the anarchists, certain sects maybe, I don't think it's a fault of anarchism as a whole, but when we say anarchism or anarchist, that has a very bad connotation to it. And I don't know why. I mean, as I said before, the way I view anarchism is maximizing human liberty and happiness and challenging systems of power and domination. And I think that's an idea that most people really get behind. I mean, we live in the United States of America, and it seems to be what we should be all about. So I think the biggest problem that anarchism has is, for some reason, we're equated with violence and these really marginal groups. What we need to do is actually get out there, let people know that we're nice. We have families, we have people in our lives that we really care about, we have passions. We're real, breathing human beings that don't want to cause chaos and disruption. It's very much the opposite. We want to make sure that people live long, healthy, good lives, free of oppression, whether it be from the state or whether it be from just normal social norms or whatever it is. So I think it's a branding thing. Are the problems with anarchists and anarchisms. And as far as the environmental stuff goes, I mean, that's my personal interest. So others that are out there interested in it, let's get together and talk. But some folks are interested in different subjects, and that's great. I mean, I love the diversity there. I think the diversity is fine. I think it's how anarchism's been branded that I think is our big problem. So. So politics that I'm interested in, as far as resources to learn a little bit about it, I mean, the net is fantastic. So you just pop anything in on the net and it'll come up. I would encourage people to check out C4SS. It was pretty revolutionary for me, so c4ss.org I would have folks check out. But YouTube videos, I mean, I can't imagine the amount of time I've spent watching YouTube. Chomsky's got everything Chomsky's ever done since the 70s is on YouTube, and that's fascinating. There's great lectures by Elinor Ostrom on YouTube, and there's local groups. I mean, if you plug in to your local community, there's local groups doing things. There's permaculture guilds popping up everywhere. Your farmers market is actually a radical place to go when you really think about what's happening there. And so there's all sorts of things that we can get involved in. We think of anarchism as this big idea, and it's these certain sects that you have to go to, but anarchism's an everyday thing. So any kind of group that folks are interested in, anything that's in their local community that they can partake in, go partake in it. Jump on YouTube, look up folks that you're interested in, and just type stuff into the internet. I mean, information's everywhere. So.